guys, what's going on? This is David Shen, and you are on Pananomics Podcast, New York Weekly's #1 podcast for 2020, and we will soon be on Reach TV in 200 airports in 6 countries to 30 million viewers. And today we have two of the best-looking chiseled doctors I've ever seen in my life, Kris M and Kris V. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thank you.
I love it. You guys have an amazing product called Novos, right? And clearly it pulls out this amazing jawline for both you men. So I definitely now must try this. But let's talk a little bit about Novos, how you guys came up with the concept and what makes it so unique in a scientific research manner as opposed to some of the other products that are out there.
Great. Kris, maybe I'll just discuss the reason for the company, and then you can go into the science behind it.
Excellent.
Okay, great. So we decided to start Novos because we felt like there was a lack of science-driven solutions out there to address aging. Most of the products out there you'll see are anti-aging formulas that address signs of aging. For example, maybe it is a moisturizer that can hide some signs of wrinkles, but it's not actually addressing aging from the biological causes. So there are specifically 9 mechanisms of aging that scientists have uncovered over decades of research, but really summarized in the past 5 years or so. And those are things, some of which you might be familiar with, like mitochondrial health or stem cell regeneration and health. But then there are other things in there as well that a lot of people aren't familiar with, like cellular senescence or loss of proteostasis and so on. So there's a total of 9 of these. And there are many biotechs that are trying to address these causes of aging, but there are no consumer products out there with safe over-the-counter ingredients that address these causes of aging. So we decided to join forces, myself and Dr. Kris Verburgh, to create Novos. And Kris can go into more details about the specific approach that we've taken.
Yeah, so indeed, I can completely agree. We created Novos a bit out of frustration that there are so little science-based, evidence-based nutraceuticals to address aging. Like most anti-aging supplements, they contain substances that not really work, that have shown, in fact, in a lot of studies to not really extend lifespan or slow down aging. For example, take antioxidants. A lot of people still believe that antioxidants slow down aging, but most unfortunately don't. We have seen that in large studies with sometimes hundreds of thousands of people that most antioxidants do not extend lifespan. Some can even shorten lifespan for several reasons. We have written extensively on our website about antioxidants for longevity and why most of them don't work. We can go deeper into that if you want to. But anyway, to make a long story short, there are just very little science-based supplements to address aging, which is unfortunate because in the last couple of years, we have seen a lot of great papers appearing, identifying all kinds of very interesting substances that have shown to extend lifespan, that act on specific aging hallmarks, as Kris explained. So the last 10 years, scientists discovered more about aging than the 1,000 years before. So we also see a huge upswing in the scientific community and even in the medical community with regard to interest in aging. Like if you said, as a scientist 20 years or 15 years ago, I study aging, it was a bit of a taboo because a lot of people would say, well, why would you study aging? Because aging is a natural process. Or they would say aging is super complicated. You cannot slow it down. So they often were received with some very skeptical looks. But that has completely changed, especially in the last couple of years. We see these conferences, great papers appearing, more and more scientists really digging into why we age, how we can slow down and reverse aging. And we capitalize on this information and we created a great scientific advisory board with top longevity scientists. We looked into databases, scored thousands of medical articles and scientific studies to identify what we believe are 12 very promising ingredients to slow down aging. And there is just a lot of very interesting research out there, and that's why we created this nutraceutical.
Well, I heard some pretty amazing things when you're talking about that. You know, one thing that comes concern of mine was I hear about these antioxidants and how it can actually hurt you. Explain a little bit more about that and why that is something that the general public doesn't know about.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. So a lot of people think antioxidants that they slow down aging. We have seen in a lot of studies that they don't slow down aging and often can even shorten lifespan, antioxidants. And why is that? Well, one important reason is that if you take a lot of antioxidants, then the cells they take up the antioxidants and they will sense this and they will say, well, there are enough antioxidants, so I don't have to create my own antioxidant enzymes anymore. And therefore, the cells lower their guards and they downregulate the production of their own antioxidant enzymes, which are in fact often much stronger in antioxidant activity, and they also work in specific compartments of the cell where you do need antioxidants, but where antioxidants, if you take them orally, like via supplement, they cannot reach those areas, like inside the mitochondria or inside the cell nucleus to protect the DNA. And to make a long story short, if you take a lot of antioxidants orally, then the cells will reduce their own production of antioxidant enzymes, which can actually accelerate aging. And we have seen this in a lot of studies. And a lot of popular antioxidants like vitamin E or alpha lipoic acid or coenzyme Q10, they don't really extend lifespan, at least in well-conducted studies. If you go online, you will find some studies that indeed show that some antioxidants slow down aging. But if you look at many other studies, they don't show an effect, or they show in fact that antioxidants accelerate aging. And if you look at the big studies that looked at sometimes of hundreds of thousands of people, they found that most antioxidants unfortunately do not slow down aging, and in some cases can even increase mortality a little bit. So that's why we decided with Novos we need to create something completely novel, and identifying actually substances that, let's say, it's a process called hormesis. So you that's also why exercise is healthy. For example, if you let's say give substances that alert the cells more or damage the cells a little bit, like with exercise, then the cells will upregulate all kinds of repair enzymes and so on, and that's very healthy. That's also the reason why vegetables are healthy, because they contain a lot of these substances that actually activate the cells to protect themselves against damage, and they do it in ways that are much better than we would ever be able to achieve often with trying to introduce small molecules into the cell.
That's amazing. I appreciate that share, doctor. Another question I have for you guys is, you when you read about this, there's no collaborations with many scientists, a lot of these companies. Why is that? How come they're not doing something that clearly to me is much needed, right? To get your expertise and to understand this. Why aren't they doing that? And why did you guys do that approach that made it so much more, in my opinion, more intelligent and much more needed than the other guys?
Yeah, Kris, you mind if I jump in on this? So I think that a large part of the issue is that many supplement companies are actually just marketing companies. They produce products that the market has expressed an interest in, or they take one not so well conducted study that has been published and then use that to justify the sales of their products, and they build marketing campaigns around that and so on. Oftentimes it's unnecessary for them to work closely with scientists and conduct their own research, because they're just trying to, not always, but oftentimes trying to just make money off of their formulations. We're taking a very different approach, as you mentioned, by teaming up with some world-renowned scientists at Harvard University, MIT, the University of Washington, University of Liverpool. These are scientists that study aging for a living. Some of them are world-renowned. For example, Dr. George Church, who was the inventor of the first genome sequencing method in the 1980s. He's a tenured professor at Harvard and MIT. And by working with these scientists, we're able to, as Kris mentioned, identify the most promising substances that are both the most safe, but also impact these mechanisms of aging that we were referring to earlier, and can have the most significant impact on both the short term, so how you feel today, right? It makes sense if you are addressing the causes of aging, you're also helping your cellular biology today. So oftentimes our customers say that they feel better, they sleep better, they are more calm, even seeing skin health benefits in the short term. But then, of course, the longer term as well, if you're slowing down the rate at which you age potentially, then you're going to see these benefits in years to come. The last thing I would mention is that we are also devoting a portion of our budget towards our own clinical studies. So we are running human clinical studies as well as cellular studies that we're just getting started with now as we are receiving venture capital. But in the year to come and years thereafter, we will be able to share those results.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and perhaps to quickly add to that, why are not more doctors or scientists looking into that? The thing still is that aging is very neglected in the medical field. So at the beginning, I told there is much more interest. That's true, but there is still too little interest because most medical doctors are not trained in aging. So you have geriatrics, but that's more like treating the symptoms of aging, not the causes. Also, a lot of scientists are not that trained or focused on aging. So that's a big problem. But that's improving, luckily, because ironically, most diseases we see in our society, like heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, and so on, all these aging-related diseases are caused by aging itself. So it's almost absurd that it's so little studied and that, it's almost not mentioned during medical education, which is, I find mind-bogglingly, because the most diseases that doctors treat are in fact caused by aging, and they learn hardly anything about aging. They just, at most people or doctors, they say, aging is caused by DNA damage, and that's about it. We know it's much more complex than that. But anyway, so that's also a reason why there is so little attention. Another reason is that a lot of these ingredients we identified and that have a lot of science behind them in the literature already, they are not interesting for big pharma to invest in because you cannot patent them. So there are a lot of substances that have shown to extend lifespan, that are very healthy, that reduce inflammation, that improve metabolism in humans, and so on. But nothing is done with these very interesting compounds because they cannot be patented. Of course, you can patent combinations of these, which what we have done because they can have synergistic effects on aging, the combinations. But pharma is also not interested in looking into combinations because pharma still thinks one target, you need to treat it with one drug. So one drug, one target. And that's where we come in. We have more this like scientific pharmaceutical approach, but we don't want to hinder or restrict ourselves to like trying to find one target for one drug, so because aging is a complex disease. It's almost ridiculous trying to treat aging with one substance because aging is caused by multiple mechanisms and you need to target all these mechanisms at the same time, and that requires often a combination of different substances. But pharma is not interested in that approach, and that's also one reason why it's so ignored, the field, the ability not to patent these molecules because they are already described in the scientific literature, and the inability to use combinations, which pharma still doesn't like to work with, also because the FDA and so on, they don't like too many combinations. They still think in this outdated paradigm of one drug, one target.
Wow, I mean that's amazing, and it's so crazy to hear about this. And you can use me as a test subject anytime. This is definitely not a paid thing. I want everyone to know this. This is really interesting to me. And another thing I read on your guys' site, which I was really interesting, was you talk about longevity and you talk about all latest science, but you talk about synergistic effects on aging and improves cognition. Explain to me what that means and how your product does that.
Yeah, so I can get started. When we created this formulation, we found it very important to also enable effects that can happen very quickly. We also looked into into competitors that also claim to develop anti-aging substances, about which we are a bit skeptical often. But one of the reasons why a lot of people stopped taking these substances was because they didn't feel an immediate effect. And often living longer is something that is too abstract for people, and they also want to have an immediate effect. So when we created our formulation, we looked into substances that besides have shown to act on aging pathways and extend lifespan and so on, whether they could also have immediate effects on skin, so like reducing wrinkles, whether they could also improve cognition and also provide more energy. And there are indeed these substances. For example, glucosamine, it's a classic supplement known to improve joint health, but very little people know that it can also improve skin, and that it also has shown to extend lifespan in multiple organisms. And there have also been studies in humans, in fact 2 studies published in the US and Europe, where they looked at many supplements people take to see whether they can extend lifespan, and only a very few supplements were associated with increased lifespan, and that was glucosamine. So that's one example how glucosamine could extend lifespan, but also improve skin health. Another example is glycine. Glycine has shown to extend lifespan by acting on the epigenetics of the mitochondria and so on. But glycine can also improve skin health because it's an important aspect of collagen or component of collagen. The same for energy, like alpha-ketoglutarate acid or alpha-ketoglutarate. It can extend lifespan. There have been great studies showing that, for example, mice live longer with alpha-ketoglutarate, but that they also have less gray fur. So it could perhaps slow down hair graying. It's alpha-ketoglutarate acid has also been used for many decades by bodybuilders or athletes to improve stamina and endurance and energy. The same for rhodiola rosea, has shown to extend lifespan in multiple species and so on. But also in humans, we see it can give more energy. And if you're like tired or or you're jet lagged, I've been taking rhodiola rosea for a long time already, and it gives me always an extra jolt of energy. But it also has shown to extend lifespan in many studies, and even nerve regeneration. There are Nature papers about also rhodiola being able to regenerate nerves, for example. So these are a few examples how longevity ingredients can also have immediate benefits on skin, energy, and cognition.
That is insane to hear, and it's so refreshing to hear. And Kris M, I see the smile, and I'm going to get back to you now. You mentioned something that I think was critical. A lot of products come in, and it's a marketing tool, right? And nothing towards what they're doing, but you said it best. They take one study, they hype it up, make it as big as they can, and go from there. You guys clearly care about human beings, the health, the positivity of the health, and going from there. But Kris M, why did you guys do that differently? Why did that matter to you so much to do it the right way as opposed to the wrong way?
Yeah, it's very personal to me for 2 reasons. One is when I've always been interested in health. Since I was 12 years old, I started exercising and eating what I thought at the time was a healthy diet, which was the high protein, low fat diet plan, which I've since learned is not ideal for longevity. And we talk more about the best diet plan at novoslabs.com/diet, where you can learn more. But where it became really personal for me was when I was 15 years old, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I nearly lost my life from that experience. And at an early age, I started asking existential questions, and ultimately wanted to avoid going through an experience like this any other time in my life, that is with a chronic illness that could potentially end my life prematurely. And so that planted a seed in my subconscious mind. And over the years, I've been researching and learning more about different ways to try to avoid chronic illness or diseases of the old, and to extend my healthy lifespan. So essentially my health span, as it's called, in addition to my lifespan. And so that was really important to me on its own. And then also additionally, as I was starting Novos this past year, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and unfortunately passed away a year ago. And it was tremendously difficult to go through, but that just fueled me that much more to make a company that is having a real significant, profound impact on people's lives. And with all of that said, I apologize, but I'm going to have to jump off in just a minute for my flight that I have to catch.
Not a problem. We'll find us, Kris. But Kris M, kudos to you and your journey and the things that you're doing. You're making the world a better place, man. We're definitely going to throw this on the airports and to hear that story, and I want to catch with you personally. But thank you for your time. Good luck on your flight. We'll finish with Kris V, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. Now, Kris, the other thing I found very interesting about what you guys talk about is you can test how old you really are in your biological age instead of relying on your chronological age. Explain what that means to most people.
Yeah, that's a great question. Where to start? So, as a medical doctor, I'm very interested in trying to assess how old people really are. You can, for example, be chronologically 50 years old. That's the age, your normal age. But if you eat unhealthy, then you can perhaps be 50, 80 years old, and vice versa. If you're 50 years old chronologically, but you exercise and eat healthy and so on, take supplements, etc., you can be much younger. So that's your biological age, your real age, and it's very strongly correlated to your risk of dying. And that's very interesting because currently we don't have good biomarkers that can really assess how healthy you really are. If you think about it, if you go, you want a health checkup, you go to the doctor and you get a blood test, and they take your blood pressure and they weigh you and they perhaps calculate your BMI and so on. But that's all very rudimentary because most blood tests are normal in people, but still they can be deficient in all kinds of vitamins and minerals, or they have normal cholesterol levels, but they'll still get a heart attack. We even see that most people who end up on intensive care with a heart attack, that they have normal cholesterol levels. So all these current markers of health we have, they are not that telling really to assess your health risk and mortality risk. So we need to do much better. And that's why we looked into biological clocks that can really determine your biological age. And for example, the most well-known of these clocks are epigenetic clocks. So these are clocks that look at your epigenome, and we know that this epigenetic dysregulation is one of the reasons why we age, and can also determine how old we really are. And what's epigenetics, you might ask? Well, epigenetics is super interesting. It's more important in my view than the genome. Like in 2003, we charted the genome, and then everyone said, "Oh, we know the genome now. We will fix everything, and we will cure disease and so on, and we can assess the health of people, etc." But that didn't really pan out. It was a bit of a disappointment. One of the reasons for this is because we see besides the genome, there's also the epigenome. And the epigenome is in fact the intricate molecular machinery that surrounds the genome, that surrounds the DNA, and that determines which genes are switched on or off. So you and I can have the same gene according to our DNA scan, but in your body, the gene is switched on, and in my body, the gene is switched off. And that can have completely different outcomes. And that's what the epigenome measures. You can also compare it a bit to a piano player. The genome are the keys on the piano, while the piano player is the epigenome. So the piano player determines which keys are activated or pushed, and how hard each key is pushed. So how hard each gene is activated or switched on. But when we get older, the piano player becomes worse and worse. So he starts to play notes or struck keys that he shouldn't struck, or vice versa. So in other words, when we get older, our epigenome becomes dysregulated. So some genes are activated, like cancer genes, oncogenes, which increases our risk of cancer, while other genes like cell protective genes or cell repair genes are more switched off during aging, which contributes to more DNA damage and so on. Now, the epigenome can be assessed, and we see these clocks. They look at the epigenome, so they look which parts of our DNA are methylated or not, to go a bit more in depth. But looking at this methylation pattern, you can determine your biological age, because methyl groups, these are little molecules. If you put them on the DNA, the gene is switched off because these methyl groups are in the way. So if you look at the pattern of which genes are methylated or not, you can determine quite accurately your biological age, which is very strongly correlated to your risk of dying and disease. So these epigenetic clocks are one example of much more interesting clocks to really see how healthy you are and to determine your mortality risk.
Wow. Kris, what's amazing is, first off, I love hearing you talk. So we're gonna have to get you on more often on this show. Secondly, what you speak is the truth in the sense where you're relaying science with just natural logic and the reason people do things, people don't do things, right? And a lot of it is fad, where you guys are doing towards fit. You know, I love hearing when you guys talk about chronological biology and the way that we age and going from there, because physically, you know, I'm 41. I might not look 41, but I literally feel like I'm in my 50s and 60s half the time, especially after 2-3 days of traveling, going from there. It gets really exhausting. And then my cognitive functions, my ability to think, to speak, to react the way I did just 5 years ago is totally different than the way it is currently now, right? So having a product like this, I think, is so important. But I want to ask you a question. Why did you feel the need to do it the right way and be part of this scientific breakthrough with Novos, as opposed to just getting money and doing it the wrong way? Do you have a story on that?
Yeah, well, there are many reasons why I created Novos. First of all, I've been passionate about aging since very young. I've always been interested in science and medicine, asking questions like, is there how did the universe originate? Is there a boundary at the universe? What's life? Why do we exist? And so on. So I've always been very curious. And of course, aging always fascinated me. It's the reason why we have to die eventually. It's the reason also, as a medical doctor, why so many diseases originate. Cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, they're all caused by aging. There are species in nature that can live to 200 years, like specific whales. They don't get cancer when they are 90 years old. They don't get Alzheimer's when they are 90 years old, like we do. They get it when they're 200 years old. So as a medical doctor, I'm also very interested, because looking at aging, you target the root cause of so many diseases, and you can much better understand how these diseases originate. And also, I think the reason why nutraceuticals as Novos are important, we need much more science-based nutraceuticals to also create more awareness about, yes, we can act on aging. We have learned a lot about aging. So to create more awareness around that. And that can also help to accelerate the field. Because if people are more interested in these nutraceuticals, and also on our website, we try to convey a lot of information about aging and how to live longer through diet and other supplements and exercise and fasting. So we really want to spread this knowledge to enable people to live longer and healthier. And because I think it's very important. I think medicine is very, let's say, focused on treating diseases when it's too late, when you already have a heart attack, when you already have Alzheimer's disease. It's trying to treat this disease a lot with medication and with surgery, which is okay, but I find it so regrettable there is so little attention on prevention and keeping people healthy as long as possible. And the best way to do that is by targeting the root cause of most diseases, which is aging itself. So that's why I think supplements, but also future interventions like drugs to target aging, or new technologies like epigenetic reprogramming, or mitochondrial therapies, or transcriptomic therapies, and so on, which are all currently in development, are going to become more and more important to keep people healthy for as long as possible.
You know, you touched on something I think that is critical, right? You talked about how human beings, as they get older, you know, the cancer rates are much more higher, you know, and then how whales don't have that issue, or tortoises don't have that issue going from there. What do you see is the core effect? Why does it happen where humans, as they age, have a more likelihood of getting cancer and being sick?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in fact, aging causes all these aging-related diseases like cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer, and that's something that's still not a lot. It's not very well known, unfortunately. So, if you talk, for example, you ask a medical doctor, why do we get atherosclerosis, a clogging up of the blood vessels? And then they will say, yeah, it's because cholesterol accumulates in white blood cells, which accumulate in the blood vessel wall, and that causes atherosclerosis. But if you look deeper, then you see that this is caused by intrinsic aging mechanisms, like lysosomal dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction, epigenetic dysregulation. telomere shortening, DNA damage, etc. And that causes all these disease processes that doctors study, but ideally they would need to go more in depth to really understand how these diseases originate. The same with cancer. We get cancer because of DNA damage, because of mitochondrial dysfunction, because of epigenetic changes, and that causes cancer. And these the mechanisms I just described are intrinsic aging mechanisms. But very interestingly, there are all kinds of animals that have much less cancer, or that age much slower, or that don't seem to age. You have polyps that seem to be immortal. You have even specific jellyfish that don't age, and they can even rejuvenate themselves. So like Turritopsis dohrnii, it's a jellyfish. If it's stressed, it becomes younger. And you have like whales. Whales are very big, so they have much more cells, so they have much more risk of getting cancer, and they don't. It's called Peto's paradox. Why do these big whales don't get a lot of cancer, but they don't because they can protect themselves much better against these intrinsic aging mechanisms like DNA damage that causes cancer. So we can learn a lot from nature how, in fact, these mechanisms cause aging, and how we can develop new treatments to address aging and cancer, for example, at the root cause.
Kris V, I mean, wow, without a doubt, this is probably one of my favorite episodes I have heard. And we've done a lot of episodes. We've done a lot of big stars, big names. I love everybody there, like us, friends. But you guys are so amazing what you're saying and the way you guys draw it. And I love the ethics behind this business. You know, the big thing about Patagonic's podcast is we do things right? We don't talk about bad things. We don't talk about things that aren't going to help the world. And to hear Kris M talk about his journey and how touching that was, and to hear you, Kris V, understand his journey from a very compassionate standpoint. Another thing is, you do one thing that most people aren't talking about. You're being defensive as opposed, you're being offensive as opposed to defensive. In other words, you're looking at the root of the problem before the problem exists, as opposed to trying to make money off of people when the problem exists and the additional emotional suffering and pain. So I kudos that to you and what you guys are doing. You have made me such a believer as we're looking at this product, and this was not paused. I actually just bought 4 of these for my sister, for my mom, my dad, my fiance. If I gotta get one for my sister and me, but my point is that's how much I believe in what you've just said. And to me, I think that's very, very critical, because that shows what you're spitting. And I consider myself a fairly intelligent person. I have 9 partners who are doctors. I understand a little about the community, but what you're saying and the purpose of it, I think, is going to separate your product from everyone else's. Anything else that we can do at Patagonomics, we can. Kris, can you go ahead and tell us the website for your product?
Yeah, definitely. So our website is called novoslabs.com, and there you find a lot of information to live longer, to improve your lifespan, to increase health, because we really want to empower people to take their health into their own hands and to take charge of their aging process. So that's why we will offer also these epigenetic clocks and other ways to assess your rate of aging and how healthy you really are from home. And we are putting a lot of information there about what's the best diet to live longer, what are the best supplements to live longer. All these supplements, we don't sell them, and they are not sponsored links. So, but we strongly believe in fact, we make a distinction between health supplements and longevity supplements. Health supplements are like specific vitamins and minerals and micronutrients like omega-3 fatty acids, which you need for health, but they don't really extend maximum lifespan. But if you are deficient in them, like a lot of people do, then you live shorter. So these health supplements are still important. And we have written a whole blog post about which supplements are the best to take, which doses. And often these doses that governments recommend are completely outdated, or they look at preventing disease on the short term, but they don't look at what happens in 10, 20, 30 years. So we advise doses that are more based on scientific literature, looking at the long term and not just at the short term. So we provide a lot of information on that website about what to eat, what to do to live longer, and we will put a lot of extra information there too. So we're working hard on getting all this knowledge out there so that people can implement it into their own lives and hopefully feel better.
Kris Verburgh, thank you so much for your guys' time. I'm looking forward to having you guys come back onto the show and talking a little bit more in depth of some of the amazing things you did. Thank you for being an inspiration and doing it the right way in the community. I don't know if you know how much that means to the world, but I will tell you, just hearing you speak and Kris M's story, it will make the impact and difference that you want it to make. So kudos to you guys again. For David Chen, Kris V from Novos Lab, thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of Pandomics Podcast, Mirabile's #1 podcast for 2020. And we'll see you guys soon. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay smart. Check it out.